Welcome to Pastor's Chat today. Well, Psalm 38 is a very interesting psalm, a psalm of confession, a penitential psalm where David is confessing his sin of adultery and sin of murder that has caused tremendous pain to come into his life. In the first verses we talked about yesterday how he is suffering physically. And usually when we have committed a sin that God has had to chasten us for, and by the way, remember Hebrews chapter 12, God's chastening is not because he's angry or mad at us, even though it might appear to us to be the case. David seems to feel like that as you read some of his Psalms, especially this one. Yet we know from Hebrews 12, God and other passages like Proverbs chapter 5, that whom the Lord loves, he chastens. He chastens his children out of love to bring us back into fellowship with him, to help us deal with the consequences of our sin so that others may even fear, because he loves us, and he does not want us going down the path that causes so much pain and hurt and disaster and harms so many people, not only ourselves, but our friends, our family, and those who we could have influenced for good or maybe sometimes turned against God. And so God's love causes his hand to chasten us. And David spoke of his hand of God being upon him or maybe against him because of his sin. And first we notice David focused on his physical condition. Now when we come to verses 8 through 14, David is looking two places. First in verse 9 he says, Lord, all my desire is before you, and my sign is not hidden from you. So for a brief moment here, he turns from himself and he turns to the Lord and says, Lord, you know exactly where I'm at with my sin. You know exactly where I'm at with my pain and my suffering and the consequences of my sin. And so now David is crying out to God. In verse 10, he says, my heart pants and my strength fails me. As for the light of my eyes, it's also gone for me. My loved ones and my friends stand aloof from my plague, and my relatives stand afar off. Those also who seek after my life lay snares for me, and those who seek my hurt speak of destruction and plan deceit all the day long. But I, like a deaf man, do not hear, and I'm like a mute who does not open his mouth. And thus I'm like a man who does not hear, and in whose mouth is no response. And David looked around, and not only could he find people that were his friends that would help him, they were gone. They stood aloof from him as if he had a plague. It word plague there is a word that also maybe indicates he was like one who had leprosy that no one wanted to be around. And David said, my friends, I thought they could have been here to help me and lift me up. But he felt like Job, maybe, when his friends showed up and just told him that he was a hypocrite and he was getting what he deserved. And sometimes when we've sinned, it so affects our friends that they're not there to help us. But we should remember, as a friend, when we see a friend that falls into sin, our position should be Galatians chapter 5. We should help them be restored. We should love them, care for them, and not partake of their sin, lest we ourselves fall into the same temptation. And so his friends stood aloof from his plague. His relatives stood afar off, even his family members. And then also the enemies were there scoffing and laughing. Oh, look what David's done. Yeah, and then they planned deceit. They planned his destruction when he was down. He was not only down, but they were kicking him while he was down. Boy, that's a bad feeling. But that's where David was as he deals with the consequence of his sin. But remember, he went to the Lord. Lord, my desire is before you, and all my sign is not hidden from you. He knew God saw the groaning, the pain, the hurt of his body and his life, and he was asking God for help. He had no answer to give to his friends, to his family, or even to his enemies. He was like a mute person, one who could not speak. He was in such pain. Well, remember, God hears the cry of your heart, even if you can't speak it with your mouth. And I trust you'll trust him, and you'll believe him, and you'll listen to the Lord, and you'll respond to his chastening hand and come to him for his mercy even today. God bless, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day.